So another day, another drama. Um, I don't know. You couldn't write this. Um, it was only yesterday actually. I was making a video. The the last one I posted about um, the Swallow Class 47, the Helgen one there. Well, not about it, but I mentioned it. I mentioned that it was causing power trips, just track power, nothing more severe than that. But the track power seemed to be tripping when it started on a hill, or even when it was just running around the layout. And I'd swapped the decoder on it, thinking maybe the decoder couldn't handle, had maximum power issues and couldn't handle the power that the Helgen needed. But after I'd swapped it, it was still causing problems, so I ended up taking it off the layout, obviously, because there it is sat on a lump of wood. So in its place, I put the APT, and I had exactly the same again. Not on its own, the Helgen could knock the power out on its own, but the APT, now I've got 3 loops going. I had 3 trains running. I had the APT, I had that Swallow livery, class 43, and there's a blue and grey livery class 43 around somewhere as well. And I could get the 2 intercities running together, but as soon as I started the APT up, and I had lots of other problems with the APT as well, which I'll go into in another video, but once I actually got it working and got it running, as soon as I started it up, track power tripped again. And occasionally, even when it was just the APT and one of the intercity trains, the track power was still tripping. So the track power monitor thing, the percentage thing that I showed in the last video, wasn't showing anything excessive. It was about 30. Well, I don't know whether it was excessive, because it just shows it tells you it's a percentage, but it doesn't tell you what it's percentage of. I'm assuming it's total capacity, I guess. But it wasn't showing anything exciting. But yeah, as soon as 3 trains got running, not more than 10-20 seconds, track power tripped, everything stopped. So I've mentioned it a couple of times, I won't go into detail, but this is my DCC command station booster. It's an Arduino Uno with a motor shield sat on top of it, and connects to the PC via USB, and it has the same power supply connected to it for the track that my old Sprog used to have on the last layout. And I never made a conscious decision to switch from the Sprog. It just happened that I kind of wanted to experiment with the Arduino, and it seemed to work. I plugged it in, off it went, and I never got around to changing it. But with what's been happening today, I think I've got to the limit of what this thing can do, and it's nowhere near enough. If this is going to start tripping out when I'm running 3 trains, I could end up with 6-7 loops running with trains on them at any one time. So if it's already struggling, I think I might be at the limit of what this thing can do. I mean, okay, I might have a dodgy one, I don't know. I looked up the specs for the motor shield, and it has 2 output channels in this green block. One goes to the main track power, and one goes to the programming track. I mean, obviously this motor shield isn't designed for DCC. It just seems to very conveniently have the connectors that a DCC controller would need, and the 2 in the middle are where the power input comes into it. So yeah, it has these 2 channels, and the spec for the board says max output on each channel is 2 amps or combined 4, which I assume means you can have, because obviously the programming track isn't going to use anything. So my assumption there is that it'll handle 4 amps out into the layout, and I think the power block that feeds it is at least 3, but it's the same block that fed my same power supply that fed my last layout, and I quite comfortably had 3, 4, 5 trains running at the same time on that one, and never ever had the slightest issue with what appears to be a trip on the power. So I can't help thinking that I've got to the limit very quickly with what an Arduino and a motor shield can do. And then the reality of that situation quickly set in that I've put a lot of time and effort into where I've got to now. I'm using that Arduino through Windows and JMRI. I really was quite pessimistic about my chances of getting up and running with an alternative solution anytime quickly. I've still got the Sprog, and it's down there at the bottom left hand corner, and Andrew who supplies them very kindly a few months ago upgraded, because mine was quite an old one by then, upgraded it to the Sprog V3 firmware, which is the latest version. And it was probably away being upgraded when I started this layout, which was why I didn't even kind of consider what I was going to use for DCC controller choice, because the Arduino was probably all I had at the time, so I just bunged it in and off it went, and then everything was working when the upgraded Pi arrived. But anyway, I thought, even if I'm going to go, my only other option without buying another DCC controller is to switch back to the Sprog. And okay, it uses JMRI, but it's a completely different operating system. It's a completely different hardware layer. What are my chances of just taking the track power out of the Arduino and plugging it into the Sprog, taking the RS485 USB stick out of the PC and plugging it into the Sprog, and exporting all of my files from my JMRI profile on Windows and importing them into the Sprog? What are the chances of that just working? And it just worked. I had to just edit a couple of connection settings. I just created a new profile in JMRI on the Raspberry Pi, imported the profile that I'd exported from the Windows one, changed the connections because obviously the hardware settings were different, so just changed the connections to match the serial connections within the Raspberry Pi operating system. Started it up and it just worked, which I'm staggered by, really, and obviously hugely impressed by. I'm massively relieved by as well, because all it's taken is a couple of hours to completely replace all of that, the RS485 control, the DCC control. So I'm still running the Windows PC up here. I haven't got a spare mouse and keyboard for the Raspberry Pi, so I'm just using VNC to remote control the Raspberry Pi for the time being while I work out what I'm going to do. But first of all, it's all worked, and second of all, with a brief bit of testing, I don't want to run any locos too much at the minute because it's still 28 up here, it's still early evening. So I'm going to give it a few more hours to cool down, and then I'll give the locos a good run around and test and see if the good news continues. Despite the APT sounding like it's driving around with its brakes stuck on, this is a massive improvement. I've been mulling over the issue with the bent plywood for quite a while now. Thank you everyone for the suggestions. The cross beam suggestions are very valid, and if it was anywhere else on the layout I would very probably do it. The issue with this particular stretch is it's going to be yard and there's going to be lots of sets of points, and I don't want to inhibit the space I've got for the motors underneath, so I don't want to put any more beams underneath the baseboard than I currently have. So I've given it some thought. I didn't really want to be wasteful. I didn't want to just rip this stuff out and chuck it out and replace it. But in the end, I think I've come up with a kind of a process almost to do with point motors as well that I'm happy about. That means that nothing will get wasted, but at the same time I'll get to rip up this bumpy ply. And it all kind of comes down to this set of points here. The set of points in this corner, in fact the whole 3 sets of points, I did the motors for them when the points were in situ and without lifting the baseboard. And I'd started doing these two because these two are directly over floorboards, and I think I filmed at least one of these. I had the camera going. I think I put one of them in a video, and it was just so simple. If I'm laid on the floor underneath, the boards are low, and the easiest way, as it turns out, to put point motors in is to just lie underneath, and rather than lift the baseboard up, if I can actually get laid underneath, it's really quite straightforward and easy, and only takes a minute or two. Then when I did this set of points, I was a bit worried about this one because this wasn't over direct baseboard, but as it happened it was over, if I come down a bit, a shelf that I put in, an MDF shelf. And I've put these on quite a way along just for storage. I mean, I've been in and out under the baseboard, so a few of the boxes are out, but they've been quite handy just for storage. And again, I think I did this in the video, but they just stood on the edge of the stilts that are underneath the edge of this edge set of floorboards. And as it turned out, because the shelf was there, all I had to do was shift these boxes and I could lie across there, and I could quite easily get at the underside. Even though it's quite deep into the layout, it was still comfortably accessible, and again just as easy as the ones that were directly over floorboards. So the real terror in my mind around these servo motors, because they do seem to fail. There's one over here that does need changing. It's really weakened and it needs changing, but the servo is too near a beam and I can't just swap the servo out, so I'm gonna have to take the mount down and swap it while the mount's down, and then put the mount back onto the underside of the baseboard. This is just temporary plywood in front here, and the problem underneath is there's no shelf. So it was really awkward work. I did these 4 when I originally put them in. I did fit them from the underside. I had a sheet of ply screwed across there that I was kind of using as a backrest, but it wasn't comfortable, and obviously, you know, my backside can only get that far. So by the time I was resting across a backrest, it was the back of my neck and it was bruised and sore for days afterwards. So the thought of having to change these filled me with terror, and I really don't want to lift the board back up again and disconnect all the track and keep having to do that if any others fail as well. So I come to the conclusion that I needed more of these shelves. In fact, I need to make sure that there is one underneath every bit of board that has some points on it within reason. So I was going to go and I was going to buy a sheet of MDF from B&Q and get it cut so that I could then saw it into the little bits, and because I've still got a few of those stilts left. I think they're buried under a couple of boxes there. So I was going to go off to B&Q, I was going to get a sheet of MDF and I was going to put a few more of these shelves in, so that in this instance I can get the lazy servo that's over there somewhere swapped. But as the kind of camera gives away, what I thought was, well, what I might as well do is get a sheet of hardwood ply and get that cut to the same dimensions as this softwood ply that's all warped here, and then what I can do is simply lift the softwood ply out, replace it with hardwood ply, and then saw the softwood ply up and use it for the under layout shelves around the rest of the layout. So that's my plan. I've been and got the hardwood plywood now, 12mm, which will directly replace this. I only actually have to lift up 2 sets of points, remove the mounts, and again, there's this one is the one that's got a shelf underneath it. The one over there doesn't, but I'll put one in before I go back under and remount it. So what I'm going to try is taking these boards out one by one somehow. So I'll unscrew the track. That's the first piece ends there. Unscrew all this track, get the motor off the back of there, unscrew all of the droppers and pull them back up again, and then try and just somehow slip that board out. I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to do that yet. I might have to unscrew another board further on. Somehow get that board out from under the track and then just try and slide another one in. Yeah, this might go wrong. Halfway there with board one. I think that track's straighter now than it was when it was on the B&Q plywood. The extent of the problem is quite apparent now it's up. This is a real lesson learned. You can't just fix warped wood by screwing it down. So I should never have accepted this, really. I think I should have probably taken it back, but live and learn. Two down. I don't know why I ended up doing the 2 end pieces first, but I did. So I just need to saw the ends off the next 2 sheets to replace those 2 in the middle. It's going to be a little bit trickier because I'm going to try and do it without taking the track up on the top level. Just tipping that middle board up, and hopefully I'll be able to get the 2 boards slid in and out. They join right in the middle of that board, which is a bit awkward. I decided after I'd put the last lot of baseboard in that it was all a little bit close to the timbers on this side. So when I put the new stuff down, I made sure I levelled it all up vertically as the camera looks at it now, and also with a little bit of clearance this side, which means it has pushed in that direction a little bit, and that's actually meant that there's now space for 3 lines underneath this top deck bit here. So I'm having to change, whereas I was thinking all I was going to do was just undo the track, slip the boards under and then put it back again. It hasn't quite worked out like that. I'm going to have to do a little bit more point work here to get the 3rd track going. Although all I really need to do for the time being is get the bit that goes underneath that top deck there, get the droppers drilled through and get it fastened down with the other 2, because then I can just connect up to it when I want. Another side effect of the little reshuffle and moving everything in that direction is that the track is no longer long enough, because it obviously used to meet this line down here somewhere, and now it meets up there. So it's the same for the two tracks up there, unsurprisingly, so I'm going to have to cut some new track to fill these gaps. Seems a little bit wasteful having ripped the whole thing up just to put it all back down again the same way, but it had to be done really. And I've got that extra line under the upper deck as well, which is a help. I've just laid down the bits underneath the fixed upper bit. They've got droppers and they're screwed down, so I can join up to the rest of it when I get the rest of the yard done. Everything down the end behind me is now wired. The servo motor's back under the baseboard as well, and I've just got a little bit of wiring and the motor to do at that end, and then I should be up and running again. The motor at this end was made easier by the new shelf made of the old soft plywood that came out, so again it's just on the black stilts, cut to size, and then two stilts at the back as well, which might just be visible, and that means I can just lay back. The board stretches pretty much all the way under, at least far enough under, and it just means I can lay back and have back support while I screw the motor mounts in, which makes all the difference. I've put one in over here as well, because there's a motor up there that's gone lazy and slow and is going to fail. It doesn't always respond, so a board under there just takes the fear factor away, and means it should be straightforward. The motor itself is too close to the beam on the left hand side for me to be able to get screwdrivers in and replace the motor while it's mounted, so the mount has to come down. But having this board here again just means I can stretch underneath and get directly under the mount, which makes it so much easier to take it, unscrew it, swap the motor, and then just screw it back in again. It's quite difficult really to catch on camera, but the new boards are down now and much smoother than the old ones. Everything's running much flatter and smoother over them, so although it was a frustrating job having just laid that track and got those servo motors and the mounts in, I'm pleased I did it now. Because it's just going to mean such smoother running and more reliable point work as well, which will be all over the place down here, so happy I did it now. It's got me motivated to get the yard lines down as well, I think, because there's that extra line under the upper deck that's gone comfortably in there, and having moved the boards back the way I did, there's the way the track approaches, the curves approach each end of these boards. The boards lend themselves now to absolutely using the maximum space available and getting the most lines down without cramping it too much. So that's what I'm going to move on to. All of the electronics are in, all the panels and drivers and things underneath the layer are all there, so it is just a case of putting the points down, getting the mounts in. I've got boards underneath every area that I need to be in to fit the mounts, so they shouldn't be too difficult to fit from underneath. So I'm all set to go.
points laid. I've also got a bit of a cold. I've now got these points laid, and I'm quite happy with the way they're spreading the tracks out and heading off down in that direction. There's only 3 new sets of points here, and they lead to that one line that goes off under the upper deck, and then 3 more lines down here. There is a little bit of space between the last line and what will be the wall there, just so that if I do end up doing scenic stuff on it, there'll be a little bit of space to put some weeds and things building up to the wall. So I'm not going to squash another line in there. So that on the clockwise storage line will give me, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bays. And I worked out, I think I've only got 8 long trains at the minute, and it's not going to increase that by that many. So with 5 on the clockwise line and maybe another 4, I've just got them sort of laid out there, maybe 4 or 5 at a squash on the anti-clockwise line, that'll give me more than enough for where I am at the minute, especially considering there'll be a couple of bays in the station and other little bits around the layout where I can keep a train, and also they're so long, these lines, that I should be able to shove a DMU on the end of most of these lines as well, while they've got a full long train in them. So over the other end now, I'm just working out how all these lines are going to meet, because the ends aren't symmetrical, which means I can't expect that a line that, no matter how straight I get it, obviously they're not straight yet, but I can't expect that a line that comes down dead straight will automatically meet a set of points. So I'm just getting to the point where the lines all meet, and then I'll straighten them up a little bit more and see where I can lay points so that everything will meet up again. So it's starting to look, by the way, this turnout line here, which is coming from the main line, from the way it naturally wants to go, it's going to meet up with the far inside line nearest the upper deck. So I need to merge the other 2 lines into that one before it all meets up. And this top line, the straight on line, will go under the top deck and meet the 3rd storage line under there, which is making its way along. I think I'm happy with this. This rightmost piece of track is now fastened down and as straight as it can be, or certainly straight as I can get it. This last piece of straight track is temporary, because there's going to be points there so it can join in with these couple of lines down here, but it's just to get me close enough to get my measurements. So this is all loose. This was an open end, so I need, if I get the set of points there, I've got a little bit of flexi track here that I'm keeping straight. So if I cut it here, this set of points is then perfectly placed to naturally turn out and meet up with, again, there'll be a little bit of flexi track there to complete the curve, and then a set of points that will join these 2 tracks that aren't fastened down yet. And the straight on, if I get the right angle, is heading in a perfect direction to head up and meet with the 3rd storage track that's under there. I'm a little bit concerned here because this set of points looks like I've made a bit of a mistake with it, and it should have just been a tiny little bit further this way, which has meant that this turnout here ended up a little bit higher than I'd have liked for it to be, for it to just naturally get into line for the track that's coming down there. So it's meant I've had to curve it more tightly than I'd like, and because it's got these plastic fish plates on it, it's allowed a bit of a dog leg. I've put a screw down on the outside so that it doesn't give and bend any more than it does, because these things are weak and over time they dog leg worse. Feels smooth. I've tried a couple of coaches over it and there's no issue whatsoever, so I'm going to leave it. But I'm going to have to test it a lot before I move on, I think. Well, I've ended up with quite a bad back, but after
most of the weekend coming up and down here whenever I could. I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra lines laid and connected at both ends now. I'm definitely done for today. But through the week, when I get a chance, it's getting the point motors, servos mounted on the mounts, mounted underneath here. There are boards underneath where I need to be, so I don't mind going underneath the layout to connect them. Clean the track and connect the frogs and the dropper wires, and I should have a few extra lines to store stuff on.